Hello, welcome to our last session, lesson 18 on media and crime, looking at the crime and deviancy unit for our GCSE Sociology. Now, we're looking in particular around a few issues today. So there are two, and this takes part of a much larger debate. So to what extent is mass media biased in their reporting of crime, and to what extent does the media's reporting of crime create more crime in society? And we're going to explore these ideas plus some more ideas in the coming slides. So to begin, let's look at our learning objective for today. So we want to discuss how far sociologists would agree that mass media has significant influence on crime in society. So there's a few things that we're going to be doing. We're going to look at some statistics. I want you to understand the difference between cause and correlation. You need to explain some links between the media, and I put a question mark there for a reason, because those links can be questionable, and there will be a 12-mark question which you'll need to respond to. Moving in, I do actually have a video that I'll get you to watch after we discuss these ideas of cause and correlation. So here we go. So correlation is this idea that there's a close link between two connected events or things, and then a cause is when one event makes another happen. Now there is often this blurred line where you've got to make sure that what it is that you're talking about is a cause and not a correlation, because often people get the two confused. I'll give you an example. So before the sun rises on a farm, a rooster will crow. And on cue, then the sun will rise. Now, does this mean that the rooster crowing will cause the sun to come up? Obviously not. And so, this then makes a logical fallacy that correlation does not equal causation. So you've got to make sure, if you're talking about things that are related, that you can point out the cause, not the correlation. I've got an example of a phone. So if you have a look at the image here, if you have a lack of RAM, it causes your phone to freeze, or it can cause then your text message to work. But many people will point to the fact that my phone is freezing, which is causing my text messaging to not work, whereas that's actually a correlation. So there's a close link there, but one does not cause the other. So you've got to be careful with that, which then should bring us into a video. And before we watch this video, there are some questions that you'll need to think about first, and you'll need to answer these questions as this video is playing. So here are the questions. During a 1-month research period, how many violent scenes were counted across 193 primetime TV shows aimed at children? You need to identify the percentage of weapons used in studied TV shows that were firearms, which is guns. With what regularity, so how frequently, did a bladed weapon or gun appear on the screen during the research? Identify correlations between children being exposed to TV violence and with which specific behavior. Identify some correlations between children's exposure to TV violence and specific types of emotional responses. And lastly, identify some correlations between playing violent video games and specific types of bad behavior. Now, you might not agree with the findings of the research, and this could be an example of correlation happening here. So let's just watch the video first. I want you then to pause at the end of the video to then answer the questions on page 96. So you have some spaces there to answer. So I'm not going to answer them because the answers are in the video. You just need to simply pause the video at points, write down the answer, and move on. So we're going to move across, and I'll let you watch the video and answer the questions.
The first time the public noticed mods and rockers coming to blows was Easter bank holiday in 1964 at Clacton. Events took the media by surprise, and the cameras didn't get there until the day after.
Chief Constable, how serious was this disturbance at the weekend? Was it in fact a gang fight?
Not as far as we know. Several hundred young people rather at a loose end over the weekend.
And what happened as far as the police are concerned?
They came into the town town and finding not much else to do, they committed several acts of wanton and purposeless damage. So the police had to turn out in some respect.
Were you and your friends mods or rockers?
Well, we're mods when we dressed up, you know.
What caused all this trouble yesterday?
Boredom.
Whose fault?
Well, both.
What happened?
Well, there was lots of things, you know. They started, you know what rockers are like, don't you?
Well, I don't know. You tell me.
Well, they motorbikes, they started bashing into the scooters and knocking down motors.
What else happened?
So, you know, well, we were in the airport as well as out.
Where do you reckon this happened?
So, saying, Whitson,
It'll be Whitson.
be down Brighton,
At Whitsun and in August, the TV cameras and the police were ready. The battles were smaller than at Clacton, but got much wider coverage.
People try to put us down, just 'cause talking about my generation, things ain't cool upon. Talking about my generation, I'd die before I get old. Talking about my generation,
Stan Cohen, a young postgraduate student from Johannesburg, was there too. He was researching social reaction to juvenile delinquency and saw that the mods and rockers story made a fascinating case study.
I've always played two roles. Sometimes I'm in the background during the day, dressed in being trying to listen and overhear conversations and kids on the street. And then I would change out of my gear, put on a suit at the time, go into the magistrate. Yeah, a completely different version. Then I'd go home, I'd go to sleep, and stay out of the club all the way till the Mirror or the Express and see another reality. But to see those three different realities, the world that it looked like for the kids, the world that it looked like for middle-class magistrates sitting miles away who's never been to the beach, and the world that it was like for a Daily Express reporter were different worlds. Not different worlds in the literal sense.
Okay, so very interesting video. You may not agree, and personally, I do have some issues with the research that's done, but I'll talk about that another time. But I want you to know I'm not trying to cause you guys to believe something in a particular way, just to consider what this person has done and put together. Now, my personal background is that I've been in video games. I've played Call of Duty, Battlefield, Assassin's Creed, all those games, and they have a lot of violence in them. As well as lots of movies as well that I've watched. So I've watched Deadpool, I've watched John Wick. So does this mean that then I have a higher likelihood of acting out violently? Well, that remains to be seen. So let's push into the, we'll continue on through our presentation. Now, you need to understand that when it comes to presenting these kind of things, facts, figures, and then reporting them, that the media has an agenda. Now, journalists and media companies, they need to sell their stories. They need to find a way that they're able to stay in business, and that is their bottom line. There is no other alternative really for them other than to try to find ways to stay in business. And sociologists who study media representation, they're interested in the ways that the media will report things, what stories they choose, how they report them, and what effect it will have on society. So this then moves into what news value is, and it's a story which is seen to be commercially viable, meaning that it will sell. They need to have stories that will sell and can be manipulated by journalists to make it seem more like fantastic, more scary, awe-inspiring, shocking. So specific issues that are seen to have more news value than others usually will have these things, like children are involved, violence is involved, celebrities are involved. So you know there's all too well, there are entire magazines. The industry around celebrities is ridiculous. I don't know why, I don't get it, but it just is. And or else there are things that are easy to understand. The event is national or local, and graphic images if possible. So have a look at the images that we have. You can see some very outlandish titles. I killed 17 women, deleter of the free world, face of a madman who killed 17 and ate them. And then you got this one here, which I found to be, I don't really know what to make of it, but I bottle fed my children, but I breastfed my pug dog. And then you have a picture of a woman, I don't really know how to describe it, but some would say it's abusing an animal. So I want you to have a look at these two headlines here. And then there's a question that how do these front pages show how certain stories have more news value than others? So how is the Sun finding some stories, what's important to the Sun readers, and then you've got the Evening Standards. What is important to the Evening Standards readers? And you have this on page 97, where you have some space where you need to identify what do you think are the values, what do you think are important, and I'll let you pause the video, and then once you're done, move in and we'll look at agenda setting. Okay, so agenda setting is this idea that if the public doesn't have personal knowledge of events, as in they haven't personally witnessed a specific event, then they rely on the media to be informed of those events. And what the media chooses to form of the public and how they do this is known as agenda setting. This means that the public can only talk about specific events that they've actually read. So they can't talk about things which they don't know about then. And this is why the media reports them can influence these discussions. You can get your active audience members, and these are people who are media literate. So they're able to decode the media messages, and they don't just take reporting at face value. They know that there is a bias in the media, and they know that there is an agenda going on. And these are people who are a lot more aware of what is going on. What is the media trying to push here? And then on the other end of this, you have your passive audience. And these are people who are just unquestioning of the media, that they read something in the paper, on the Facebook feed or Snapchat, TikTok, whatever, and they just take it in and accept it. So those are your two types. So you need to know an agenda is what the media chooses the audience to talk about, and that is the agenda setting. Now I want you to have a look at this image here. This is Mark Duggan. Mark Duggan. He was shot by London police in August 2011, and this was what sparked the 2011 protests. It led to large-scale riots across the UK. I want you to have a look at this image here. What do you think when you see this person, and this was a picture, what do you think the media is trying to get you to perceive? I'll rephrase. How is the media trying to get you to perceive Mark Duggan by posting such a picture? You can see his eyebrows are low, he's not smiling, he looks angry or sort of upset at something. You can tell he doesn't look like he's really a nice person. But then this is a cropped image. The media are very good at this, and you should be well aware of this. You of all people should understand how cropping an image can change in an image's entire context, because when you actually look at it within context, you can actually see that this is a picture of him. The whole picture of him is actually him visiting his daughter's grave, and who can blame him for not smiling? So it goes to show how the media is trying to portray Mark in a specific way, and you've got to be careful of this. This is what the media does. So I want you to identify and explain how this is an example of agenda setting in the media reporting. This is on the bottom of page 98 now. I want you to explain what has the media done here, and what are they trying to do here. And then as an extension, I want you to provide any further examples of agenda setting that you know of. I don't really mind where it is, preferably related to crime, but if you can think of another topic when agenda setting has been done, where the media is trying to force you to have a conversation or think about things in a particular way, I I want you to write that down. You don't have to go into depth. Okay, so again, pause the video, write down the answers, and then continue. Okay, so we're now going to look at folk devils and moral panics. These coins that are termed of folk devils comes from a guy called Sam Cohen from 1970. In this picture, which I'm going to look at, I'll show you what is to do. It comes from more so the 60s, but the term was coined in the 70s. Okay, so let's look at what a folk devil is. Again, this is in your booklet, page 99. So the media can portray, I guess, a group of people as highly deviant. So every now and again, the country gets, a bit uptight about one thing or another, and whether it be the Mail accusing refugees of eating swans, or the hysteria around teen pregnancies, these sweeping waves of mistrust and fear and criticism, amongst other things, are known as moral panics. And the group they like to focus on are the folk devils. These are the people that are believed to be highly deviant, dangerous, or criminal, and they're marked as different. So, for example, in the case of the refugees, eating swans, how dare they? So, and that's an example where they are then, they're pushed aside to society or whatever angle you want to go on. This does carry over to, the punk age. I'm sure you can think of a few other examples. We're going to look at one in particular. What else? The homeless can be an example of to be avoided because they've done something or something's happening. Teen pregnancy is another. This you can see then. Pedophiles is another one. You see UK teens, so teenagers, you can be one. So you can see there are some headlines here where there are some folk devils. These are the devils of society. And these are closely related to scapegoats. Very closely related to scapegoats for that. And these are linked to the idea of folk devils, but describes more so how a certain group of people are to blame for society's problems. So, in Australia we call them dole bludgers, or we refer to these people who are living off benefits as the cause for why the economy is so poor. Boomers obviously has been a more recent scapegoat. People like to blame boomers for the failing economy or for the housing market. This is an example. And it is a way that we will then avoid us feeling like we are responsible for things, and we can pass that on to others. It's a psychological thing that happens. So, and then lastly, done that one. Okay, so this then brings us into deviancy application. But before you do, I want you to provide some examples of modern day folk devils and scapegoats created by the media in the middle of page 99. So please do that. And then we'll look at deviancy amplification. You can see I have a wonderful picture going on here, which kind of shows how the social reaction then leads around to this cycle. So there's a cycle of exaggerated and sensationalized media coverage. So deviancy is made, it is made bigger in the public mind. So as well as those of politicians and even the police. And the more sensationalized things become, the worse reality seems, even if some cases there is actually very little danger to the public. This may lead to a change in how people behave. So how do people cross the streets to avoid a group of young people in hoodies, or police targeting more members of a particular group? And you would know this as teenagers walking into shops. Full well how there are signs out there how you won't even be allowed into shops because you're in school uniform. So you know this all too well, just because of some reporting, some things that got sensationalized, making out that there is a crazy crime wave going on, and now you guys are the scapegoats, or you are the folk devils. So, and you can see this as we head around that there is this group that is isolated. So that we go to the social reaction. Society reacts to the deviant. So let's say a bunch of youths in school uniform rob a chicken shop. Let's be stereotypical here. The deviant group then are isolated. Then the group resists the social action, so which leads to people rebelling against that, and that leads to more deviance. So think this is now leading into rioting. Then the government's attempt to control the deviant behaviour, passing new laws, doing things, and you're continuing to be labelled as immoral or deviant, and then this leads to moral panic, meaning the society police, government identify the society as being in moral danger due to your group, and then the behaviour is labelled as deviant, the media reports, and it just goes around. You can see how it just spirals around out of control. So, and this is what leads into moral panic, which is a term that is linked to deviancy, amplification, and folk devils. It describes how exaggerated, sensationalized news reporting of a particular deviant or criminal act can lead the public to think that it is a much bigger problem than it actually is. This group or event is a threat to the security of society overall. So, where does this bring us? We want to put this stuff into practice now. So you've learned a whole bunch of different things. So what folk devils are, what exaggerated, sensationalized reporting is, deviancy, amplification, and moral panic. We're going to tie this to where it originates from. Now this is a video here, so if you've got the link to the PowerPoint, you can watch it. We're going to watch it here as well, and I want to see if you can find and identify the groups that are portrayed, where is the reporting being sensationalized, the deviancy, amplification, and the moral panic. Point to the examples in the clip of what we are about to see. Okay, so we're going to watch this, and then we will then tie up everything.
The first time the public noticed mods and rockers coming to blows was Easter Bank Holiday in 1964 at Clacton. Events took the media by surprise, and the cameras didn't get there until the day after.
Chief Constable, how serious was this disturbance at the weekend? Was it in fact a gang fight?
Not as far as we know. It was several hundred young people, rather at a loose end over the weekend.
And what happened, as far as the police are concerned?
They came into the town and finding not much else to do, they committed several acts of wanton and purposeless damage, so that the police had to turn out in some strength to deal with them.
Were you and your friends mods or rockers?
Well, we're mods when we're dressed up, you know. Mods!
What caused all this trouble yesterday?
Boredom.
On whose part?
Well, on both.
What happened?
Well, there was lots of things, you know. They started, you know what rockers are like, don't you?
Well, I don't know. You tell me.
Well, they, you know, their motorbikes, they started bashing into the scooters and knocking our motors.
And what else happened?
So it was their fault as well as ours.
Where do you reckon the next battle of that kind is going to be?
Well, it's hard to say, isn't it? Whitson it'll be, won't it?
It'll be Whitson, will it?
Be down Brighton, more or less.
At Whitson and in August, the TV cameras and the police were ready. The battles were smaller than at Clacton, but got much wider coverage.
People try to put us down my generation just cause talking about my generation. Things ain't cool at all. Talking about my generation. I die before I get old. Talking about my generation. My generation.
Stan Cohen, a young postgraduate student from Johannesburg, was there too. He was researching social reaction to juvenile delinquency and saw that the mods and rockers story made a fascinating case study.
I was always playing three roles. I would sometimes walk around during the day dressed in jeans and trying to listen and overhear conversations and talk to kids at youth clubs and talk to kids in the street. And then I would change out of my gear and put on a suit and tie and go and interview a magistrate and hear a completely different version. And then I'd go home or I'd go to stay up in a club all night and come up the next morning and buy the Mirror or the Express and see another reality. But to see those three different realities, the world that it looked like for the kids, the world that it looked like for middle-class magistrates sitting miles away who's never been to the beach, and the world that it was like for a Daily Express reporter were different worlds. not different worlds in the literal sense, but different worlds in the sense of different images of the same world. And that's what sociology is. You have to find some ways of reconciling, of finding the relationships between them.
Cohen realised that media coverage was a crucial link between the different worlds he encountered. He saw for himself that the press exaggerated the scale of the disturbances and the amount of damage and violence. He wasn't the only one to come to that conclusion.
Well, I think this is partly a case where the press has let us down nationally. I think this has been vastly exaggerated. At the most, £200 of damage was done at Clacton.
One of the newspapers itself said had there been an international incident that justified the headlines in the papers during the weekend, this wouldn't have even been reported.
The press coverage triggered a reaction out of all proportion to the original incidents.
Collect them all up and put them on a boat and send them out to Cyprus where our boys are and bring our boys back that's got common sense. Blimey, I think the police should have been a bit harder on them. Bring back the cat!
In 1972, Cohen published Folk Devils and Moral Panics and provided the classic formulation of how a moral panic works.
The media, by their reaction, kept the panic going and therefore, in a sense, amplified it. And the police, by going along with it, added to the drama, and the drama was what attracted the kids there. There would have been no point in going there if it was just like any other Friday afternoon on the beach. Without the drama, the phenomenon didn't exist.
Rockers that started, they screw you, and if you
What does
change
screw
them,
mean?
Look you up and down and think, this is a funny way of dressing you, think you're a puff or something like that.
They think you're a poof.
Well, that's the way they look at you, as if to say it, So you look at them back and they come over and start trouble. If you don't bother, they keep on at you, so you have to bother.
By the way they're dressed, the makeup and that they have on them, and the eyeshadow, and all boots and that. Boy, sometimes I fancy them myself.
Okay, so that was a really good video, which kind of shows where it has come from. So now I want you to go over, identify these groups, and answer the questions that is on page 99. Okay, let's move into then the last bit of today's lesson. Okay, so you can see we have some extension questions that I want you to go over. So you have a headline here. This was, I'm not too sure, it was a while back, but it looks at 11 Londoners were stabbed to death in 16 days as the headline. So you got all the pictures there. So, to what extent is reporting on knife crime in London not an example of deviancy amplification? Explain your answer. And you've got some space there. And then there have been many examples of folk devils and deviancy applications since the mods and rockers. So explain the possible effects of saturation of reporting deviancy. So what effects if you are overly doing this, overly reporting it? What are some of the effects that can happen? Obviously, you can go refer back to the amplification cycle, the spiral that happens there. And lastly then, what you need to do is you need to go back to that 12-mark question, and I want you to respond to that. So that 12-mark question was looking at how far sociologists would agree that mass media has a significant influence on crime in society. And I understand this lesson did not necessarily look at sociological perspectives per se. You can actually find these if you go on to Google. You can find different sociological perspectives. But to what extent would people agree more so? So I know there was the thing which Trump put out recently about about video games, saying that there's violence linked to video games, which I strongly disagree with personally. But there is some evidence which he is referring to. So I want you to think there's obviously that narrative pushed there. There's also the other narrative that, well, is it completely harmless? Is there completely nothing wrong? So I want to see where you can go with that. But apart from that, this concludes the crime and deviancy unit. I will see you guys then later on with the next topic.